Luis, 32, when this whole story unfolded. Working a steady logistics job, living in a modest suburban place, thinking my life was more or less on solid ground. Had been married to Allie for about 5 years. Back when we first met, she was easy to be around, sharp, funny, independent, with her own hobbies and opinions. Over time, though, the dynamic started shifting. Not in some dramatic moment, more like a slow drift. You only notice once it's already happening. Little by little, she became heavily involved in online feminist spaces. Suddenly, everything was a problem. The way I sat was man-spreading. The way I offered to carry the groceries was benevolent sexism. The way I was quiet after a long day at work was stonewalling and a sign of my toxic masculinity. Every single day was a new lesson, a new test I didn't know I was taking. I tried to keep up, I really did. Read the articles she sent me, watch the documentaries, tried to use the right vocabulary, nodded along when she went on rants about the patriarchy oppressing her, because the air conditioning at her office was set to a male temperature preference. But it was never enough. Every conversation became a minefield. If I disagreed with her on anything, I was being defensive. If I agreed with her, I was only doing it because I didn't really understand and was just trying to shut her up. Our home stopped feeling like a home. It felt like a re-education camp where I was the only student, and the teacher hated my guts. My hobbies were a problem. I liked working on my old car. That was contributing to carbon-based patriarchal oppression. I enjoyed grilling on the weekends. Apparently that was me performing masculinity because of some primal connection between men, fire, and meat. She literally said that. So I stopped. I just stopped doing things I enjoyed to keep the peace. The house became quiet. I'd come home from work. We'd eat a silent dinner she approved of, usually quinoa and kale. And then she'd be on her laptop, probably reading about more ways I was a terrible person. The intimacy was long gone. Any attempt was met with suspicion, as if I was just trying to exert my privilege. I felt like a ghost in my own life. The final straw was a conversation that I still can't believe happened. She sat me down one evening with this deadly serious look on her face, told me we needed to talk about my inherent biases. She'd made a list on a spreadsheet. It detailed all the ways I had failed to be a proper ally to her in the past month. Stuff like interrupted her to ask where the salt was, and didn't show adequate enthusiasm for a female-led movie reboot. I just stared at the spreadsheet, and I felt nothing, just empty. I told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I was exhausted. Her eyes lit up, not with sympathy, but with victory. This was what she wanted. She launched into a pre-rehearsed speech. It was all there. I had refused to do the emotional labor. I was stagnant and comfortable in my patriarchal conditioning. She said she'd outgrown me, that she needed a partner who was on her level, someone decolonized and truly evolved. And then she dropped the bomb. She'd already found him. It was some guy she'd met at an art gallery opening, a conceptual artist. He wasn't afraid of his emotions, she said. He cried openly, and his art was all about dismantling systemic power structures. I just sat there. I didn't even have the energy to be angry. I just felt a strange sense of relief. The fight was over. I had lost, but at least the fighting was done. A week later, she was packing her things. The house was full of boxes. She took everything she deemed unproblematic: the art prints, the organic spice rack, the books with stern-looking women on the covers. She left behind my old recliner, my collection of classic rock records, and my toolbox. As she stood by the door, surrounded by her boxes, she gave me one last lecture, a parting gift. It was a warning that, unless I did some serious work on myself, I'd die alone, a relic of a bygone era. She said she was going to live an authentic life, free from the burden of having to educate her own partner. I didn't say anything, I just watched her go. The door closed, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. And that's how it began. Me, alone in a half-empty house, officially diagnosed as toxically masculine. The first few weeks were a blur. I basically lived on frozen pizza and cheap beer. The house was a mess, clothes on the floor, dishes in the sink. I didn't have the energy to clean. It felt pointless. I'd just go to work, come home, and sit in front of the TV until I passed out on the couch. I was sleeping like garbage, felt tired all the time. My performance at work started to slip. I missed a deadline, messed up a shipping manifest. My boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I just mumbled something about personal issues. I was in a downward spiral. I felt worthless. Allie's words were echoing in my head. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a broken, obsolete man. One Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I ignored it. Then came the loud banging. I dragged myself off the couch and opened the door. It was my best friend, Frank. Frank is one of those no-nonsense guys. A former Marine, now runs his own construction business. He took one look at me, then at the state of my living room, and just shook his head. He walked past me into the house, wrinkling his nose at the smell of stale pizza. He didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss," or any of that soft stuff. He just said, "Jesus, Luis, it looks like a depression den in here." I shrugged. "Feels like one too." He opened my fridge, saw the sad collection of beer bottles and a single, questionable-looking lemon. He slammed it shut. "All right, that's it. This pity party is officially over." He told me she did me a favor, that he never liked her and her constant psychoanalysis of everything. He said I let her walk all over me for years and that this was my chance to get myself back. I tried to argue, to say it was complicated. He wasn't having it. He pointed a finger at my chest. "You're a good man, Luis. You just forgot how to be one. We're gonna fix that. Be ready tomorrow. Oh, 600. I'm picking you up." I asked where we were going. "The gym," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Time to stop feeling sorry for yourself and start building something. I wanted to say no. I wanted to crawl back to my couch. But the way he said it, there was no room for argument. The next morning, he was there, right on time, honking his massive truck horn. I felt like death. But I dragged myself out of bed and got in. The gym was hell. I hadn't lifted anything heavier than a case of beer in years. I was weak. My stamina was non-existent. I probably looked pathetic next to Frank, who was lifting weights that looked like they belonged on a forklift. But he didn't make fun of me. He was patient. He corrected my form, started me on light weights, pushed me to finish my sets. At the end of that first session, every muscle in my body was screaming. I collapsed back into his truck, drenched in sweat. "See," he said with a grin, "you're not dead yet." We started going 3 times a week. Slowly, painfully, I started to see changes. It wasn't just physical. The intense physical exertion was like a release valve for all the frustration and misery I'd been carrying. I started sleeping better. I started eating better because I didn't want to waste a hard workout on junk food. Frank taught me how to cook simple, healthy meals: steak, chicken, vegetables, real food. My mind started to clear. The fog of depression began to lift. I took Frank's advice and started building in other areas of my life too. At work, I volunteered for a project that was a total mess, a new logistics software rollout that had gone completely sideways. Nobody wanted to touch it. I figured I had nothing to lose. I spent weeks buried in manuals, on the phone with tech support, working with the warehouse guys to figure out the glitches. I worked late, came in early. I was too busy to feel sorry for myself. And then, one day I fixed it. I found the core issue in the system integration and developed a workaround. My boss called me into his office. I thought I was in trouble. Instead, he shook my hand and told me I'd saved the company a fortune. A few weeks after that, I got a promotion, a big one. I was now managing my own team. The pay raise was significant. For the first time in years, I felt competent. I felt respected for what I could do, not judged for what I was. The house was still half empty, though. It still felt like her ghost was lingering in the empty spaces. One weekend, I was cleaning out the garage. In a dusty corner, under an old tarp, was my old woodworking equipment, my table saw, my collection of chisels, my lathe. I hadn't touched them in years. Allie had hated it. The noise, the sawdust. She called it a primitive and polluting hobby. I pulled the tarp off, ran my hand over the cool metal of the table saw. I remembered how much I used to love it. The smell of freshly cut wood, the satisfaction of creating something real and solid with my own hands. Something sparked in me. I spent the whole weekend cleaning and organizing the garage. I set up my old workshop. I went to the lumber yard and bought a beautiful piece of oak. I didn't have a project in mind. I just started working, cutting, sanding, shaping. The world outside the garage disappeared. It was just me, the wood, and the tools. There were no judgments, no tests, no ideological lectures. It was pure and simple. I built a coffee table, a solid, heavy, well-made thing. When I was done, I put it in the middle of my living room. It was the first new thing in the house, something that was completely mine. It changed the whole room. It looked better, more grounded. So I kept going. I built bookshelves, a new dining table, a frame for my bed. With each piece, the house became more mine. Her ghost started to fade. I was filling the empty spaces with my own work, my own identity. Months flew by like this. I had a routine: work, gym, workshop. I was in the best shape of my life. My career was taking off. My house felt like a home again. I wasn't happy, not yet, but I was content. I was stable. I had built a new foundation for my life, one that nobody could criticize or tear down. I didn't date. The thought of it was exhausting. The idea of opening up to someone again, of trying to meet their expectations, I wasn't ready. Frank tried to set me up a couple of times. I always politely declined. He understood and didn't push it. I'd occasionally hear things about Allie through the grapevine, mutual friends who hadn't yet picked a side in the divorce. Her social media, which I never looked at but Frank sometimes did out of morbid curiosity, was a showcase of her new, enlightened life. Pictures of her and the artist at protests. Long, rambling posts about love, art, and revolution. Her posing with his art, which usually looked like a pile of garbage someone had spray painted. It all seemed so performative. Frank said it was nauseating. I just found it sad. It felt like she was trying so hard to convince everyone, and maybe herself, that she was happy. One day, about a year after the split, I was at the hardware store. I was working on a set of outdoor chairs and needed a specific type of weatherproof varnish. I was standing in the aisle, comparing two cans, when a woman who worked there came up to me. "Finding everything okay?" I turned. She had a friendly smile. This was Nicole. I explained what I was looking for, the type of wood I was using. Her eyes lit up. She didn't just point me to the right product. She started asking me about the project. She knew about woodworking. She knew the difference between a dovetail and a mortise and tenon joint. We ended up talking for 20 minutes. I showed her a few pictures of the furniture I'd built on my phone. She seemed genuinely impressed, not in a patronizing way. She pointed out details, asked about my process. The conversation was effortless. It was the first time I'd talked to a woman for more than 5 minutes without feeling like I was being interviewed or judged. As I was getting ready to pay, she smiled and said, "Well, if you ever decide to take commissions, you have your first customer." Something in me just clicked. All the confidence I'd been building for the past year, in the gym, at work, in my workshop, it all came to the surface. I heard myself say, "How about I just buy you a coffee instead, as a thank you for the expert advice?" I was half expecting her to say no, or to give me a weird look, but she just smiled wider. "I get off in an hour." We met for coffee, and we talked for 3 hours. We talked about everything and nothing: work, hobbies, family, bad movies. It was so easy, so normal. There were no buzzwords, no lectures, no agendas. She laughed at my dumb jokes. She told me about her own life, her passion for gardening, her dream of one day owning a small plant nursery. When I told her about my recent divorce, I kept it simple. We grew apart, wanted different things. She just nodded. No probing questions, no psychoanalysis, just acceptance. At the end of the date, as I walked her to her car, I felt a kind of cautious optimism I hadn't felt in a long, long time. We went on another date, and another. It was slow, steady, and comfortable. Nicole was kind, a fundamentally kind and respectful person. She loved my woodworking. She'd come over and just watch me work in the garage, content to just be there. She thought it was amazing that I could create beautiful things with my hands. She never once made me feel like my interests were stupid or problematic. She celebrated my promotion at work with me, telling me how proud she was of my hard work. With her, I didn't have to perform. I could just be. My life finally felt whole again. I had my work, my fitness, my hobby, and now someone to share it with. Someone who added to my life, instead of trying to dismantle it piece by piece. Life was good, quiet, stable, and good. And I didn't think about Allie at all anymore. She had become a footnote in a chapter of my life that was now closed. Or so I thought. My life with Nicole was the opposite of my life with Allie in every conceivable way. It was easy. It was simple. We built things together. I don't just mean the furniture. I built a raised garden bed for her in the backyard. She spent weekends teaching me about soil and plants. We'd be out there, hands in the dirt, not saying much, just enjoying the quiet work. It was a partnership, not a power struggle. She never tried to change me. She actually seemed to like the things Allie had despised. She liked that I was steady and reliable. She thought my quiet nature was calming, not a sign of emotional constipation. One evening, we were cooking dinner together, and she was watching me chop vegetables. She just said, "You're a good man, Luis." It was so simple, so direct. I almost didn't know how to react. After years of being told I was a project that needed fixing, to just be told I was good. It was a powerful thing. I introduced her to Frank a few months into our relationship. I was a little nervous. Frank's approval meant a lot to me. He can be an intimidating guy if you don't know him. We had a barbecue in my backyard. I grilled steaks, something I hadn't done in years. Nicole brought a massive salad from her garden. She and Frank hit it off immediately. They spent half an hour making fun of my taste in music. As they were leaving, Frank pulled me aside. He just clapped me on the shoulder, a big grin on his face. "She's a keeper, buddy. Don't mess this one up." That was the highest praise you could get from Frank. Life was just good. While my life was rebuilding, Allie's was, from what I later pieced together, completely imploding. It started out looking like a dream, at least on the surface. Her social media was a constant stream of posts about her new, authentic life. Her and the artist at some protest, holding signs made of cardboard. Him reading poetry in a dimly lit coffee shop. Her looking on with adoring eyes. Endless photos of his installations, which were mostly just piles of found objects he'd arranged in his loft. The captions were always a mouthful, all about interrogating consumer culture and challenging heteronormative paradigms. It was a perfect picture of a progressive, intellectual couple, but the reality was something else entirely. The artist didn't have a job. He considered conventional work to be a form of slavery under late-stage capitalism. His art didn't sell because nobody wanted to buy a sculpture made of old tires and broken mannequins. So, Allie was footing the bill for everything: the rent on the trendy, overpriced loft, the organic, vegan, ethically sourced groceries, the expensive art supplies for his projects. Her savings from the divorce, which wasn't a huge amount to begin with, started to vanish at an alarming rate. She got a job at a coffee shop to make ends meet. I can only imagine how that must have felt, after all her talk of breaking free and living an authentic life, to be serving lattes to people she considered bourgeois sheep. The cracks in her perfect new life started to show. Her partner's emotional openness was actually just a complete lack of emotional regulation. He'd have screaming tantrums if his art wasn't getting enough attention online. He'd accuse her of not supporting his vision if she suggested gently that maybe he could try selling some smaller, more commercial pieces. He was a black hole of need, constantly demanding validation, praise, and, most of all, money. Her social circle wasn't much better. All those woke friends from the art scene, they were all about community and solidarity in theory. In practice, they were just as selfish and narcissistic as her boyfriend. They'd come over to the loft, drink all her wine, eat all her food, talk for hours about their own revolutionary ideas, and then leave her with the mess. Nobody ever offered to help. Nobody ever asked how she was doing. She was just the person who paid for the party. The breaking point came about a year and a half after she'd left me. Her money was completely gone. She was working double shifts at the coffee shop and was still behind on rent. She finally confronted the artist. She told him he had to contribute, get a job, any job, sell something, anything. He did not take it well. He flew into a rage. He accused her of becoming a capitalist shill. He screamed that she was trying to stifle his creative genius with her mundane financial anxieties. He said she was just as bad as the patriarchal system he was fighting against. Allie came home from a grueling 10-hour shift the next day to find the loft half empty. He was gone, and he hadn't just left. He had taken her laptop, her camera, and a piece of jewelry her grandmother had given her. The only thing he'd left behind was one of his sculptures in the middle of the floor, and a note. The note said he couldn't be with someone so ideologically compromised, and that he was moving to another city to find a more supportive arts community. So, there she was, in a loft she couldn't afford, with no money, no boyfriend, and a pile of trash that was supposed to be art. She got an eviction notice a week later. She tried calling her friends. Suddenly, everyone was busy. Nobody had a couch she could sleep on. Nobody could lend her any money. The community she thought she was a part of vanished the moment she needed something from them. She was completely, utterly alone. And that's when she must have started thinking about me. Not about the man she left, not about the person she claimed to have outgrown. She must have thought about the house, the steady job, the stability, the life she had thrown away because it wasn't exciting or radical enough. In her mind, she probably started rewriting history. She probably convinced herself that I must be miserable without her, that I was just sitting in my house, pining for her, waiting for the day she would return. She probably imagined it as a grand romantic gesture. She would show up, having learned her lesson about the cruel world. I would see her, my heart would melt, and I would welcome her back with open arms. She would be the hero of her own story, returning from her adventures to reclaim her kingdom. She had no idea that the kingdom wasn't there anymore. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those perfect lazy days. Nicole and I were in the backyard. She was tending to her garden, and I was putting the finishing touches on a small wooden bench I'd made for her to put amongst her flower beds. The sun was warm, my dog was sleeping in a patch of grass. It was peaceful. Then the doorbell rang. I figured it was a package delivery or a neighbor. I wiped the sawdust off my hands and went to the front door. I opened it, and my whole body went cold. It was Allie. I barely recognized her. She looked haggard. She was thinner, her clothes were worn, and she had dark circles under her eyes. The confident, righteous glare she always had was gone. It was replaced by a look of desperation. She had clearly rehearsed this moment. She tried to put on a sad, brave little smile. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Luis." I just stood there, my hand on the doorknob. I didn't say anything. My mind was racing, but on the outside, I was perfectly still. She took my silence as an invitation to continue. She launched into her speech. It was all there. She'd made a terrible mistake. The world was a cold, hard place. She'd been foolish and arrogant. She said she'd thought about me every day, that she realized the stability and safety I provided was the only real thing in her life. She looked up at me, her eyes starting to well up with tears. "I was wrong, Luis. I was so wrong. I want to come home." She said that last word, home, like it was a magic key that would unlock everything. A few years ago, that scene would have destroyed me. I would have caved instantly. But I wasn't that person anymore. I looked at this woman standing on my porch, and I didn't feel anger or pity. I felt nothing. She was a stranger, a ghost from a life that wasn't mine anymore. I took a calm breath, and I said the words that had been building inside me for nearly 2 years. "Allie, this isn't your home anymore." My voice was quiet, but it was firm. It was the sound of a door closing, gently but permanently. The confusion on her face was almost comical. It was like her brain couldn't process it. This wasn't in the script she'd written in her head. She started to stammer. What do you mean? This is our house." And at that exact moment, perfect timing, Nicole came up behind me. She'd heard the doorbell and then the long silence. She put a hand on my back. "Honey, is everything okay?" Her voice was soft and concerned. Allie's eyes shot from my face to Nicole's. She saw Nicole's hand on my back. She saw the easy intimacy between us. She saw a happy, pretty woman standing in the house that she still considered hers. And in that instant, something inside her snapped. The mask of the sad, repentant victim shattered into a million pieces. Her face twisted into a snarl of pure, undiluted rage. It happened so fast. Her eyes, which had been filled with fake tears a second ago, were now burning with hatred. "Oh," she hissed. "I see." The volume of her voice shot up. "So that's what this is? You couldn't wait, could you? You just had to run out and find some little homemaker to replace me." Her voice was getting shrill, ugly. She took a step forward, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I gave you the best years of my life. I tried to make you a better man. And this is how you repay me? You throw it all away for some submissive little doormat who who probably thinks the patriarchy is a kind of flower. She was screaming now. The whole neighborhood could probably hear her. She was throwing all the old words at me: toxic, fragile masculinity, misogynist. It was like she was trying to cast a spell, to turn me back into the weak, apologetic man she used to know. But the words had no power anymore. They were just noise. Nicole flinched at the venom in her voice, but she didn't leave my side. Her hand was still on my back, a small, steady point of support. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get into a shouting match with her. There was no point. I just looked at her, this screaming, furious woman on my porch, and I felt a profound sense of peace. I had survived this. I had moved on. I was free. I let her rant for another few seconds, and then I calmly interrupted her. "I wish you all the best, Allie. I really do. Goodbye." And then I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. The click of the latch was the final word. On the other side, she was silent for a second, as if in shock. Then came the hammering. She was pounding on the door with both fists, screaming my name, screaming obscenities. Nicole looked at me, her eyes wide. I just turned the deadbolt. A solid, satisfying clunk. I put my arm around her and led her away from the door, back towards the kitchen. The pounding continued for a minute or so. Then it stopped. We heard one final frustrated scream, and then the sound of her footsteps retreating down the walkway. And then, silence. A deep, peaceful silence filled the house. Nicole and I just stood there in the kitchen for a moment. She looked up at me. "Are you okay?" I looked around my home, the home I had built. I looked at this wonderful woman who loved me for who I was, and I smiled, a real smile. "Yeah," I said. "I've never been better." And I was. I really, truly was.